Coming up in today's newscast, Israeli police again recommend indictments against Interior Minister Aryeh Deri for corruption. The Public Security Ministry launches a new Bureau for the Protection of Children. And sorry to burst your bubble, but the balloons from Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade will not be coming to Israel as previously reported. In breaking news this morning, police have again recommended that Interior Minister Aryeh Deri be indicted on multiple counts of fraud, perjury, tax evasion, money laundering, and breach of trust. Details of the investigation are still yet to come, but what has been reported is that the bank accounts related to Deri and his family have been allegedly connected to millions of shekels in unreported income from a still unnamed businessman. If true and Deri were to be found guilty, this would be the second time that he will have been convicted of corruption while serving as acting interior minister. The Shas party leader, Aryeh Deri, first went to prison in 2000 for nearly 2 years after being convicted for taking bribes while serving as interior minister in the 90s. And after his release, it was almost a decade before he returned to politics, where he was then reappointed as interior minister by Prime Minister Netanyahu. Well, this latest police announcement comes from the Israeli anti-corruption Lahav 433 unit, which stated that in cooperation with the Israeli Tax Authority, it had just completed its 3-year-long investigations into Deri. And the evidence and recommendations for indictment will now be forwarded to State Attorney General Avichai Mandelblatt's office. Still, so far, Deri's office has responded with confidence that the recommendations will be found insufficient in proving criminal action. In fact, the statement they released read, quote, "We welcome the conclusion of the police investigation, and we received with satisfaction the suspension of the serious suspicion of receiving bribes and stealing from associations and others, which at the time led to the opening of the investigation. We believe that when the state prosecutor's office works on the matter, the rest of the suspicions will also be cleared, and it will become clear that Minister Aryeh Deri did not break the law," end quote. We'll update this story as details are revealed. One of Education Minister Naftali Bennett's many criticisms of the government recently is that they've allowed a sense of over-legislation in the army. That is to say that our soldiers are more afraid of the military advocate general than they are of the military commander of Hamas. Well, Bennett is coming under fire for these comments, and joining me now, perhaps with some reasons, is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Sherman, thank you for coming back in today.
Thank you for having me again. All
right, so first of all, this goes back to, the so-called Azari effect, the Elor Azari effect, which goes to, former soldier Elor Azaria, who shot an unarmed and disabled Palestinian terrorist in the head. So, he was sued, and so now we're talking about this. But that's not a real thing, according to polls and according to senior officials. So why is Bennett saying that?
Well, I'm not sure you're right about that. I think I just saw a poll this morning which shows that the public have a very dim view of the over-legalization and the judicialization of many fields of life in Israel. And I think it shows a growing disconnect between public and the legal establishment. If the legal environment doesn't reflect the prevailing values and mores of the society, you're going to find people sort of losing trust in it. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence. There's been an ongoing study that shows that there's an eroding level of trust in the judiciary, the courts, etc., etc. I think it's very dangerous.
But so first of all, polls and studies like that are saying similar things worldwide, actually, these days. But more importantly, here, I want to press you on that. What evidence is there that the judiciary really is not following the will of the public, because they're still demolishing houses just like the public
wants? Well, not really. I mean, if you look what's happened with the house of the terrorists in the Balkan, they haven't demolished anything, and they're only partially demolishing, which really seems a bit like splitting hairs. There hasn't been. There are a lot of houses that haven't been demolished. I think it was one of the major complaints against Lieberman that he hadn't been able to push through the demolition of houses. And if there's too much of a gap between the act and the punishment loses its effect. I mean, there seems to be a sort of a very strange double standard between the way Israel's military actions or coercive actions are judged and elsewhere. I think it was in 1996 when on 60 Minutes, when Leslie Stahl interviewed Madeleine Albright, if you remember. She was Bill Clinton's ambassador to the UN and then later Secretary of State. And Stahl asked her, you know, about the effect of American sanctions on of UN sanctions, American-led UN sanctions on Iraq at that time. And she said, we've heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more than children that died in Hiroshima. And, you know, is the price worth it? And Albright responded, I think this is a very difficult choice, but the price we think is worth it.
But what does that have to do? I mean, how many cases of legislation taken against single soldiers has there really been? Because that's what he's talking about here in these comments. He's saying that an individual soldier is afraid to act properly in the field because he's afraid of legislation later.
Well, as I say, there is an atmosphere that, you know, the comparison was, you know, every soldier needs a lawyer. Because instead of allowing greater discretion, greater operational discretion, it's the army has become constrained by fear, not so much of legislation that's been enacted, but fear of legislation that may be enacted. And if you look at what happened, for instance, in the I think it was 2002 Jenin operation, where instead of using air power, they put foot soldiers in and lost 13 soldiers because of fear that using air power may not have been in accordance with the prevailing legal atmosphere. So I think there is. I mean, look, I'm not advocating allowing the army to open up deliberately on civilians, but I don't think that enemy civilian casualties are a operational constraint. You know, if casualties are going to prevent the operation or are going to greatly endanger Israeli lives, I don't think that can be a consideration. I mean, at some stage there should be some common sense should kick in.
Well, I'd like to believe that if soldiers in any military, but especially in the IDF, were conducting themselves under the appropriate guidelines of war in whatever situation that they were in, that they wouldn't have to fear from legal recourse. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Dr. Sherman, thank you so much for coming in.
Next time, maybe we can talk about how NATO behaved in Kosovo.
Next time. Thank you so much, Dr. Sherman.
Okay.
All right. International home renting company Airbnb Incorporated is making waves today after announcing Monday that it would remove listings put up in Israeli settlements in the West Bank. So far, the decision affects around 200 listings, and while Palestinians were ecstatic about the news and hailed this as a step towards peace, Israel called it a, quote, wretched capitulation to boycotters. Airbnb has already noted, though, that it had apparently thoroughly thought out the pros and cons of the situation before coming to a decision, and in their statement they wrote, quote, "We know that people will disagree with this decision and appreciate their perspective. This is a controversial issue. There are many strong views as it relates to lands that have been the subject of historic and intense disputes between Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank," end quote. But they continued to say that while they hope for peace, as of now they have a global duty to act responsibly, and this is the decision they came to. Israeli right-wing lawmakers, however, immediately urged settler homeowners to take legal action against Airbnb and threatened to limit the organization's operations in Israel as punishment as well. Strategic Affairs Minister Gilad Erdan said he planned to speak with senior U.S. officials, too, to see if the move violated American laws against Israeli boycotts that exist in 25 out of the 50 states. And former Israeli ambassador to the United States, M.K. Michael Oren, further said, quote, Airbnb blacklists Jewish apartments in Judea and Samaria, not Palestinian apartments, not apartments in Turkish-occupied Cyprus, not in Moroccan-occupied Sahara, not in Tibet or the Crimea. Airbnb's policy is the very definition of anti-Semitism. Marked by UNICEF, today is World Children's Day, when every nation is reminded to unite in building a world where children are safe, in school, and unhindered from their potential. And on behalf of Israel, Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan announced last night that his ministry will be launching a brand new bureau dedicated to protecting children from online harassment. That, and it'll have a 24/7 dedicated hotline. The creation of the bureau comes after a government decision in 2016 looked to reduce crime online. But Erdan explained further that our children are vulnerable to offensive content spread online, nudity, violence, cyberbullying, extortion, and even sexual abuse, which can destroy lives. So to protect them from this kind of abuse, Erdan, quote, decided to change this reality and establish the National Bureau for the Protection of Children on the Internet, end quote. Hotline 105 will be staffed nonstop by specially trained officers, as well as members of the Ministries of Public Security, Education, Welfare, Justice, and Health. And Erdan hopes that now parents will have a dedicated and easily accessible place to turn when they're not sure where else to go. Police Commissioner Roni Alshekh added that from now on, Hotline 105 will, quote, provide service and security to minors who have been injured on social media sites, and a great deal of emphasis will be placed on information and prevention. In a very rare move, Israel has just sided against the United States at the United Nations this week regarding a non-binding sexual harassment resolution. France and the Netherlands led the negotiations over the draft resolution in response to the growing global Me Too movement, and the language of the resolution helps battle sexual harassment by enshrining access to reproductive health care services and safe abortions, and by recognizing the right to women to decide on matters related to their own sexuality. But the United States sought to remove parts of the resolution, thereby weakening the text that had already gained backing from most of the world, including the European Union, Russia, China, India, several Muslim countries, and even the Vatican. And the main sticking point for the United States, though, was apparently abortion, as United States diplomat Courtney Nemroff said that the U.S., quote, doesn't recognize abortion as a method of family planning, nor do we support abortion in our reproductive health assistance, end quote. While the two amendments to the text presented by the United States were rejected in votes at the General Assembly Committee this week, and Israel helped do it. So in the end, the resolution was adopted unchanged by a wide consensus in the committee. Still, the United States has not changed its stance, nor does it seem likely that they will anytime soon. In a similar United States bid just last week, the states took aim at reproductive health for girls in a resolution on forced marriage, which also failed to get approval at the UN. Some United Nations diplomats blamed the shift in policy on ultra-conservative supporters of United States Vice President Mike Pence, but regardless of where it's being initiated, the international community seems to disagree. The French ambassador criticized the U.S. shift to align with some of the world's least progressive governments on women's issues, saying, quote, we need America in this fight against sexual harassment, in keeping with the values that it has always upheld with us, end quote. Due to, quote, persistent and egregious bias against Israel, Israel and the United States pulled out of UNESCO, the United Nations' culture and heritage organization. And then just earlier this year, Prime Minister Netanyahu declined an invitation from UNESCO to attend their conference on anti-Semitism, saying that UNESCO must do more than host a conference, it must stop practicing anti-Semitism too. Well, it seems the world body is making great efforts to do just that, as it's just launched a website dedicated to fighting Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. UNESCO paired up with the World Jewish Congress on the project, and earlier this week in Paris revealed the new interactive Facts About the Holocaust site. UNESCO has also previously published the UN's first guidelines on fighting anti-Semitism worldwide, and now with this website hopes to eliminate the, quote, increased hate and disinformation online, end quote, regarding Jews and related topics. Facts About the Holocaust features a wealth of resources, including facts, of course, as well as witness and survivor testimonies, short descriptions and analyses, news, and much more. It's also paired directly with the online Holocaust Encyclopedia hosted by the United States' Holocaust Memorial Museum. So there's plenty to find, and all this and more is why now some Israeli officials are actually even rethinking their decision to leave the organization. Here in Israel, in the wake of the exploding measles epidemic, doctors and health officials both are urgently demanding that parents vaccinate their children, and especially within the ultra-Orthodox communities, which are suffering from higher rates of infection. Well, now the issue has apparently spread to the UK, where Jewish doctors in British Haredi communities are calling on ultra-Orthodox families to get inoculated for measles. Amid the first measles outbreak in Hackney, London in years, doctors have now joined public health officials in reassuring religious Jewish families that the measles vaccine is indeed safe. Cases of measles first began popping up in Israel's strictly Orthodox communities several months ago and have since spread to areas such as Stamford Hill. The prevailing reason for this, though, is that unfortunately dangerous and thoroughly debunked claims about the dangers of vaccines seem to have spread unabated among the Jewish religious communities. This, in turn, has led to the vaccination rates in Haredi areas of the UK to drop to 20% below the national average. But there's so many studies now that have shown the measles vaccine to be safe, and now with measles outbreaks recurring, the news is starting to catch on. Hackney general practitioner Dr. Joseph Spitzer said, quote, a local rabbi contacted me to ask about immunization, and I was able to reassure him that I have absolutely no reservations about vaccination, and in fact the opposite. Childhood immunization has been so successful that it's helped wipe out many terrible and life-threatening diseases, end quote. And earlier this month, another rabbi from an all-girls school also urged parents to take action and get their kids vaccinated as soon as possible. He warned that the spread of measles could be deadly to both the young and the old, especially after there have been several instances in which families sent their children to school despite one of their siblings having the measles. Health professionals have warned that that still risks spreading the disease, and they advise that in this situation, the whole family should seek medical attention. Once one is vaccinated, however, the disease that can cause long-term disabilities and even death becomes preventable. In related news, drugs and drug therapies are advanced all the time, but how often do you hear about updates to drug delivery systems? Well, Intech Pharma develops drugs based on delivery through their Accordion pill, which is a capsule that unfolds and stays in the stomach for a period of 8 to 12 hours. And here with more is Chief Operating Officer of Intech Pharma, Nadav Navon. Nadav, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, so tell me a little bit about the Accordion pill, how it was developed and what makes it so unique.
Okay, so basically the Accordion pill is based on layers of polymers that are laminated one on top of each other. And these layers contain the drug and folded into a standard regular gelatin capsule. And when the capsule reaches the stomach, it dissolves, and this accordion unfolds and stays in the stomach for 8 to 12 hours. During this time, the drug or drugs are being released in a predefined manner in comparison to other pills that stay very short time in the stomach and pass very fast to the intestine. The advantage of this delivery system is that by releasing the drug only in the stomach, it enables drugs to be absorbed slowly and therefore eliminate these huge peaks and troughs that drugs suffer from a regular delivery system.
Am I assuming correctly that that also if you process the drugs too fast, you're not getting the full effect of the drug?
Exactly, especially for drugs like levodopa in Parkinson. Levodopa in Parkinson has been there for the last 50 years, and it is very effective for the treatment. However, it suffers from adverse effects that are mainly related to the drug pharmacokinetics. We've been able to deliver the levodopa in a very sustained manner, and therefore prevent this huge peak that correlates with these adverse effects.
Now I heard you mention earlier that it has this accordion effect, and you said drug or drugs. Are you telling me then that you can maybe put different drugs in different parts of the same accordion pill, exactly, so that you'll get maybe a series of different therapies in one pill? Exactly.
For instance, for our most advanced project contains both carbidopa and levodopa, 2 drugs, and we have several release layers in the same accordion pill, and we're currently in the phase 3 study in Parkinson's disease patients, and we're going to have results by mid of next year after we have demonstrated very nice phase 2 results in advanced PD patients.
All right, so tell me a little bit about some of the other projects maybe you're working on that we didn't mention.
Sure.
And yeah.
So we have a very interesting project with cannabinoids. We're formulating THC and CBD. These are the active APIs derived from cannabis. We have also...
Is this synthetic or derived from the natural plant as well?
We used initially plant-derived APIs, and now we're using the same ingredients, the synthetic ingredients. We demonstrated very high bioavailability for THC. We also had very nice results for CBD, and we're currently in a phase 1 study with these 2 ingredients. We also have a partnership with Novartis. We are formulating one of their drugs into the platform. So basically, the Accordion is a platform, and it does not. We're not concentrated only in one single therapy,
sure,
but we can. Several kinds of drug can benefit from this technology.
All right, Nadav, it's incredible, and I'm so excited to see what comes out of this. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
All right, Israeli TV shows have been making lots of noise lately, and now the critically acclaimed show Nebsu has added to the chatter, having just won an International Emmy Award. The show focuses on an interracial family in which Gili, an Israeli man of Ethiopian descent, and Tamar, an Israeli Ashkenazi woman, are married. The show was brought about in response to a series of passionate, if not at times violent, protests between Ethiopians, Israelis, and police in Israel in recent years. But rather than focus on the drama, the creators of the show knew that the correct response was comedy. They hope that by making light of the frictions between Ethiopian immigrants and the broader society, they can promote mutual understanding. Star and co-creator of the show, Yossi Vasa, similarly told the JTA that, quote, "There's definitely a lot of cultural confusion in the show, but the great thing about comedy is that when the audience laughs, that means they get it, so that's progress," end quote. The Reshet Network comedy beat out nominees from Mexico, Spain, and Canada to take the top prize at the ceremony in New York on Monday. And of course, Yossi Vasa was present with his co-creator, Shai Ben Attar, to accept the award, making Nabsu the second sole Israeli production to take home an international Emmy. The first was Israeli TV show Ramzor, which won the Best Comedy Series category back in 2010. But now on a related note, in addition to Nabsu, a Dutch film about Israeli writer Etgar Keret also won the award for Best Arts Programming. The film is titled simply Etgar Keret, based on a true story. Researchers from the Hebrew University shared their results recently regarding a new glioblastoma treatment with the potential to improve and extend patients' lives. It could be a groundbreaking achievement for cancer treatments, and ILTV's Dorian Mizrahi joins us now with the details.
Hey Aaron, so a research was just published in the Nucleic Acids Research Journal regarding a new aggressive treatment for brain tumors. Glioblastoma is a serious and incurable brain cancer, and when patients receive their diagnosis, they typically have 11 to 20 months to live. One of the main difficulties of treating this cancer is that the cells quickly build up and they form a resistance to chemotherapy. The team at Hebrew U designed a molecule that inhibits glioblastoma tumor growth by regulating the proteins it produces.
So how exactly does that work?
Okay, so the team that found this is headed by Professor Rotem Karni, and the way he explained it is that there is a gene that produces two different protein products. These proteins have two opposing functions. One inhibits cancer growth and one supports cancer growth. The new molecule allows the tumor-stimulating protein to decrease while producing the tumor-suppressing protein to increase. And as a result, the cancerous tumors decrease or die.
Incredible. I can see why people are excited about this. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, because you said that this was a particularly aggressive and difficult cancer to deal with, can you tell me a little bit about the study?
Of course. In the study, lab mice were injected with human glioblastoma tumor cells, and they developed tumors. Those mice were then treated with the new molecule, and the tumors shrank or died off completely. So this really brings a new approach to tackle brain tumors, and it's just amazing to see these things happen.
All right, another incredible advancement, I guess, here in the land of Israel. Thank you, Doriel, for the report.
Thanks for having me.
Now, for all you American expatriates here in Israel, I have a bit of unfortunate news. Just days ago, the Diaspora Affairs Ministry in Israel announced that the balloons from this year's world-famous Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade will be coming afterwards to Jerusalem for the upcoming Hanukkah Parade. The Hanukkah Parade will include floats, classic automobiles, concerts, and more. And the ministry further reported that the executive producer for the Macy's Parade will also be arriving to oversee the festivities. But speaking to the Jerusalem Post on Monday, Macy's reported that, in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Macy's director of media relations said that both the claims about the balloons and the producer coming to Israel are, quote, categorically incorrect, end quote. And this has since forced Israeli officials with both the Diaspora Affairs Ministry and the parade to walk back many of their promises. First, a parade spokeswoman said that instead of including any actual props from Macy's, the Hanukkah parade will just be in the spirit of the Macy's parade. The rep further explained that the balloons will come from an external supplier and that one of Macy's producers, J. Jeff Beckman, will come to Israel to be on hand, but that he isn't an executive producer as previously stated. Hanukkah parade organizers confirmed last night that international Jewish music star Matisyahu will still be performing and that the event will be a, quote, demonstration of unity between diaspora Jewry and the citizens of Israel, end quote. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. In honor of Israeli TV comedy Nevsu winning the International Emmy Award, today's word is lenatzach, or to win. Lenatzach, or to win, is important, like lenatzach, or to win over a rival for a work contract, or to lenatzach in a pie eating competition. But nitzachon, or victory, isn't everything. What passes for success isn't even consistent from one person to the next. So just remember that the only person you ever really have to lenatzach, or beat, is your previous self, and the water temple in Ocarina of Time. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy and pleasant with a low of about 61 or 16 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect cloudy skies again, but with a slight rise in temperatures to a high of around 75 or 24 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.71 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.